theory, the system of communism, some would argue, is better than the theory underpinning capitalism. In communism, it's about us. It's the collective. It's all of us. We are all in it together. We share ownership, we share resources, nobody's left out, nobody's excluded, at least in theory. In capitalism, it's not about us, it's about the money, the capital. There's also an underlying philosophical difference in the assumption of human nature. The capitalists believe that avarice and greed and self-interest are prime motivators of Homo sapiens, and there's nothing you can do about that. Cuba is a shitty little island with pretty well nothing much except for, I think, sugar. They had a communist revolution when some guy that looked like a younger version of Santa Claus took charge, implemented communism. Since that time, initially Cuba was propped up by the USSR when it existed, then the USSR didn't exist anymore. During that entire time, America made a global effort to do everything it could to crush Cuba. Yeah. Not so much militarily, but economically. No trade with Cuba. America was the natural trading partner. They wouldn't even allow other countries to trade with Cuba. They tried everything they could to strangle it, to destroy it, because they didn't want a viable example of communism or socialism on their doorstep. Because otherwise all of the poor people in America would start going, oh, well, it looks like the poor people in Cuba have got a lot better off than we have. And if you look at Cuba, Cuba has rates, this is now about 10 years old, if you look at the child morbidity, child mortality, life expectancy rates in Cuba, they are significantly higher than in America. Because in America, if you're poor, basically you're shit out of luck. If you can't pay for a doctor, you don't get to see a doctor. Basically, if there's anything you can't pay for, you just don't get it. That's capitalism. If I'm rich, I pretty well get all the benefits. If you're poor, well, it's got nothing to do with me.
Cuba, as run by Castro was actually armed and financed by the CIA. He was put there by the Americans.
In my mind, there is no doubt that the philosophy underpinning communism is superior to that of capitalism, because communism is about community, it's about the people, it's about the collective, it's not about the individual. Capitalism in its purest form is law of the jungle. The obvious middle ground is what's called socialism. There are some people who think that socialism is just a code word for communism, but it's not. They used to say Australia, up until just before the 80s, was the most socialist, non-socialist country in the world. We didn't officially have a socialist government, but we had a government that believed in minimum wages. We had a government that taxed the rich really, really hard. Socialism is the way to go, and that's what you've actually got in any civilized place. Would you have rather grown up as a young female in East Germany or West Germany?
Definitely East Germany.
Definitely East Germany.
No doubt, hands down.
Yeah. Because in East Germany, it was all about the collective.
Correct.
It wasn't that the men were above the women, the rich were above the poor. Correct. It was about resources being shared, at least in theory. Now, all political systems become corrupted. The only value of people in capitalism is either as a worker or a consumer. And if you're not a worker or a consumer, you shouldn't really be alive. Some people make the mistake of aligning communism with totalitarianism. And totalitarianism is a problem, and it doesn't matter, again, what system you've got. If you're living in a monarchy that's totalitarian, you've got a problem. If you're living in capitalism that's totalitarian, you've got a problem. Especially if you're living in a capitalist nation like South Africa and you're one of the blacks. You've got a serious problem. Not so bad now, used to be worse before, still not good. It's about the way it's applied. Communism or socialism underpinnings or philosophies or starting points are the better ones, because it's about bringing out the best in people rather than capitalism where you're appealing to the worst in people.
Well,
nonsense.
Okay, is there anyone here who disagrees with me who is not a right-wing prat? I see one.